Next.
Following a rough year for Sony Pictures, the studio now faces a brand new challenge. According to a story in Variety, the
Rough
studio...
year? Did something go wrong at Sony? Am I missing something?
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. According to a story in Variety, the studio will lose their rights to co-produce and distribute the Bond franchise films after the release of the upcoming Spectre. Sony Pictures chairman Tom Rothman said the following: "The reality is that Sony's had a fantastic run with the Bonds. Sure, we're going to compete for the rights, but let's be honest, so is everybody in the business. This Bond is going to be great, and hopefully we'll do as good as a job that we did on the last one." Skyfall's box office was by far and away the highest that any Bond had ever done. Eric, how big of an impact would the loss of Bond be for Sony, and can they win the rights back in the upcoming fight for it?
A very tiny impact. No, huge impact.
I thought you were serious for a second.
This is now a $1 billion franchise, and especially as international box office grows to be sort of this dominating force in the industry, James Bond is a huge worldwide property. This is a mega franchise. And so I definitely think Sony wants to keep it. And they have a shot just like everybody else has a shot. You know, everybody will go in. I think Paramount will probably go out hard for it. I think Paramount could use a really big $1 billion franchise right now. I think Spectre is going to, I think it could make $1 billion, just like Skyfall. So yeah, I think this is a huge deal and people will be looking at it. But I wouldn't necessarily think that if another studio gets the rights to distribute these movies that they're going to completely change. You know, I really do feel that a lot of the creative input and is fueled by the Broccoli's. And so I don't think, don't necessarily think that if Paramount now gets the movies, everything's screwed up. Goodbye to James Bond. No,
right.
So I don't think this is such a big sort of decision maker for fans at home. That doesn't necessarily mean I would be interested to see it in another studio's hands. I do think that we're nearing the end of sort of a page in James Bond's history. Daniel Craig is coming up for his contract. So I'm curious to see now if another studio does get it, if they reboot with a new character, new James Bond, and where it goes from there. So.
I think you're absolutely right when you mentioned the whole idea about how if it does change hands and it goes to another studio, let's say Universal for argument's sake or whatever, that it'll be completely different. No, because remember, MGM is still there. MGM is still the constant partner in there that's going to be making these things go. Now, some people are also have been asking online and stuff like that, oh, what did Sony do to lose the rights of Bond? Nothing. It's just that the duration of the contract is up. They had the rights for a certain amount of films up until the end of Spectre, and once Spectre is done, then the rights are up. But we were just talking off camera about this. It's like LeBron James, for another sports analogy, when LeBron James's contract with the Cleveland Cavaliers years ago was up, they didn't lose him. It's just his contract was up, and that they had as much of a chance to get him as anybody else when he ended up with Miami. That's the situation here. The rights are going to end up with somebody, and they could go back to Sony. I think you are dead on when you mention Paramount. Paramount needs this badly, maybe more than Sony needs it, because when you look at Sony's upcoming slate, they've got a lot of big potential stuff coming up that could be big hits for them. Paramount right now, outside of putting out 5 Transformers films a year, is that my one fear, though, is that as soon as Bond goes to Paramount, you're going to see, a Bond Transformers crossover universe.
G.I. Joe and Bond together again.
I don't know. What do you think?
I think Bond and G.I. Joe, it's time for them to team up. Yeah, you know what? As long as Daniel Craig is done, it'd be weird to jump to another company and still have Daniel Craig as James Bond. So
remember, MGM would still be the other co-producing partner of all that, though.
Right. I guess, it doesn't really matter who the giant company really is, who's putting out these films. It matters who's making them, who's writing them, who's directing them, who's starring in them. So that's actually the really core, what you should care about is, who's writing it, who's directing it, who's in it. These outside matters of what company shell game is going to be throwing several $1 billion back and forth to each other ultimately doesn't impact any of us as the viewers or the watchers or the enjoyers of any of this content. But, to a certain degree, you do care a little bit when you're well, you hear so much about Sony's problems through these hacked emails, and their films just didn't work out the way that a lot of people wanted them to this year. So, and we were hearing that even before The Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out. We were hearing Sony's going to be cutting up they're hacking up all their stuff.
Film division.
Everything's going away. So, it is a little bit of a concern, where if you like the James Bond character, you don't want it to just disappear in a rights battle. for like 3 or 4 years, which could happen, like bone of contention. You said we could do this and this. So that's my only concern really, is like the rights issues being held up in some kind of like, bottoming out, or MGM can't handle it, or this or that, which has happened before. So
yeah, we're in a good, I would say the last 2 out of 3 Bond movies were fantastic, and Spectre looks great.
Yeah.
So it's like, I kind of want things to stay as is right now. We're getting really great James Bond movies. And so hopefully it does. Do you ever think that they would cross over, like in this day and age of universes? I know that's
Snake Eyes and Bond.
But is this a franchise that would ever do something?
Well, what's the big one that everybody's always asking about crossing Bond with? Bourne. A lot of people have always asked about crossing Bourne and Bond over. I don't think it would ever happen, but if you did.
The Bond supremacy.
Look, that's blockbuster. That's instant blockbuster if you do it. Now, whether it would be good or not, I don't know. It depends on who's in control of it and who's directing it.
As long as Spider-Man made a guest appearance.
Yeah, Spider-Man at some point will have to make an appearance.